Mid-Pacific, 1996. A ship pays out a tiny 1-inch diameter fiber optic submarine cable. This single cable will connect 75% of the world's population. To the average modern telephone user, submarine cables mean little, yet they are one of the single most important links to international communications. Even in the space age, modern fiber optic cables transmit voice and data traffic with much higher reliability and at a cheaper rate than satellite transmissions do. With over 320 active submarine cables lying on our ocean floors, carrying over 2 billion minutes of voice and data traffic per year, submarine cables have become the mainstay of our global village. But this ease and speed of contact that underwater cables make possible is relatively new. A little over 150 years ago, there were no submarine cables at all, let alone any that link continents together. When the telegraph was invented in 1837, engineers dreamed of communicating across oceans, lakes, and rivers. It was the inability to waterproof, pressurize, and insulate a cable from the ocean's conductive medium that stalled for years any progress of telegraphy through the water.
It just so happens that in the 1840s, something that had been known for a long time in Southeast Asia and Malaya was made available in Europe. It's called gutta percha. It's sort of like rubber, and it's a sap from a tree, but instead of being stretchy like rubber, it's really a plastic.
It's very good insulator, and it's not bothered by pressure or water. So it became the ideal insulant for telegraph cables.
One of the first successful gutta percha submarine telegraph cables to be installed was across New York's Hudson River in 1848. By 1852, submarine cables up to 300 miles long were connecting England, Holland, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. Others were even connecting Italy with Corsica and Sardinia. But something as grand as stringing a 3,000-mile cable across the Atlantic Ocean was still nothing more than a dream. Cyrus West Field is considered by many historians as one of the greatest Americans of the 19th century. Yet there are few who remember him. This man won no wars, cured no illnesses, saved no lives. His greatest accomplishment lies buried in sludge at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and has for 150 years.
Field was born in 1819. He was a sick child, and he spent his first several years in bed, and the rest of the family always said he was making up for lost time during the rest of his life. He was described as a squirmy young man, always starting projects, always extremely busy, never an idle moment.
At the age of 15, Field went to work for a dry goods store in New York City. It was there he learned the fundamentals of running a business and the art of negotiating financial transactions. Field wouldn't last long as a store clerk. By the age of 18, he had created his own paper-making company to satisfy a growing demand for high-quality stationery products.
Cyrus Field grew enormously wealthy. He drove himself relentlessly. He was up sometimes nearly 24 hours a day working. Eventually, this caused his health to fail.
Virtually exhausted and under doctor's orders, Field was forced to retire at the age of 33. He was planning to spend the rest of his life leisurely traveling around the world with his wife. However, in January of 1854, one late-night meeting changed Field's life forever. He met with an English engineer named Frederick Gisborne, who had been in charge of building a telegraph line across Newfoundland. It was an extremely important project. It would decrease by several days the length of time it took for news to cross the Atlantic. steamers from Europe could arrive in St. John's and flash urgent messages ahead to New York. Unfortunately, the costs far exceeded the original budget, and the Newfoundland Electric Telegraph Company went bankrupt, leaving Gisborne with a substantial debt. Gisborne met with Field in hopes of raising more capital to finish this important project. Field, relaxing after a vacation to South America, had no intentions of investing in any new business ventures. He politely listened but promised nothing. Later that evening, while alone in his library, Cyrus examined his globe and suddenly realized that the Newfoundland Telegraph would be just one link in a far more important project. Why wait for steamers to bring news from Europe? Make the telegraph do the entire job.
Well, I mean, that's a sort of simple-minded approach that any of us would take who had no knowledge whatsoever of the technology. I mean, he didn't have the slightest idea of what the problems were, whether this was technologically feasible or not. So he contacts two people at first.
First, Field contacted Lieutenant Matthew Maury, a prominent oceanographer and head of the National Observatory in Washington. His timing was perfect. Maury had just completed a series of soundings across the North Atlantic.
Lieutenant Maury told Field, coincidentally, that he and his team of scientists had just recently discovered a plateau which ran all the way across the North Atlantic. The plateau was relatively smooth and soft and would be ideal for laying a cable across. It had a soft, mucky sediment on the top, and the cable could sink gently into that sediment.
This comparatively narrow and flat area between America and Europe is exaggerated here for clarity. Its presence was great news to Field. The Atlantic Ocean has much deeper sections which would have made cable laying impossible due to pressures incurred at such depths, not to mention the many more miles of wire that would have been needed to slink up and down the ocean's mountains.
Next, Field contacted Samuel Morse, the great pioneer in telecommunications in the 19th century. It was, of course, Morse who not only perfected and built the first telegraph in the United States, 1844, but also developed the telegraphic code that bears his name, Morse code.
Morse responded promptly to Field's inquiry. He said yes, in his opinion, telegraph signals could be broadcast via wire across the Atlantic Ocean. Ironically, 11 years earlier, Professor Morse had prophesied Field's dream.
Telegraphic communication may with certainty be established across the Atlantic Ocean. Startling as this may now seem, I am confident the time will come when this project will be realized. Samuel Morse, 1843.
With the endorsement of Maury and the support of Morse, Field became obsessed with laying a transatlantic telegraph cable. He didn't know how, but he knew it would take lots of money. That would be the easy part. For what lay ahead were years of technical setbacks and disasters. From the time he had the idea for the transatlantic cable, it took Cyrus Field just 3 months to organize a company and raise the money.